G'day, it's Jamie, and welcome to Where's My Yowie. Today, I'm reading an old newspaper article about life in the Mallee Scrub from 1873, so we'll get into it. This was published in the Ballarat Star on Friday, the 28th of March, 1873, titled Sketches of Life in the Mallee Scrub by Anne Oxonian. Mallee Amusements. I do not mean to say anything here of such amusements are common to the whole bush, kangaroo hunting, duck shooting, and so on. The reader will find plenty about that sort of thing in the columns of the Australasian at any time, and described by professional sportsmen too, to which class and present writer by no means claims to belong. I shall confine myself to sports having a more special claim to the title at the head of this chapter, in which category the hunting of wild cattle and horses may be classed. The wild cattle are older inhabitants of the Mallee than any of the white men, for they originated in some herds of very valuable cattle which strayed away northwards from the sea coast in the early days of the colony, and long before any settlers had penetrated into the country to the north of the Grampians and Pyrenees. As settlement proceeded, the cattle retreated further and further away from the haunts of men, till at last they found a pretty secure refuge in the boundless wilds of the Mallee. They have, in course of 30 years, increased and multiplied greatly, but not only by natural increase, but by the addition of numerous recruits. Stray bullocks, cows enticed by wild bulls, young calves who had got mixed by accident with the wild herd have added greatly to their numbers. Although they amount to many thousands, how many would be useless to attempt to guess, but an idea of their numbers may be formed from the fact that one year there were more than 500 on one run alone. They gazed in various small oases scattered through the Mallee, and had formed well-defined tracks from one small plain to another. In this way they proved of use to the settlers, for it was by following these tracks and the patches of open country were first discovered. In winter they never ventured out of the scrub, but in summer they had come to dams and waterholes for water. As they consumed much valuable grass, and worse than that, pulled up and destroyed still more valuable waterholes, and crushed down all the fences in their way, every settler was desirous of thinning their numbers as much as possible. But the country was wide, and their means of escape were many. In spite of all the hunting, they kept up their numbers. Another inducement to these hunts was the excellence of beef, more tender and succulent than any of the tame cattle. Moreover, the slaughtering of wild cattle saved much killing of sheep, and the beef was agreeable change after a long course of mutton. Hence cattle hunting was, and is still, not quite to the same extent, a thing almost daily, or rather nightly, occurrence during the slack season after shearing. There is sufficient excitement about it to make it a favourite amusement, especially to young bushmen, and the slight intermixture of danger only adds piquancy to the sport. Everyone feels that it is a relief to the monotony of bush life. Even if you are a quiet tent-keeping Jacob and no mighty hunter or man of the field, still, if you have lived in the bush for a short time, you will find that you possess enough of the British hunting instinct to find enjoyment in sport. You may never have fired a shot in your life before. You perhaps have just hit a moderate-sized haystack at 100 yards, or can be thin-blooded student, caring for none of these things. But if you are persuaded to join in one of these hunts, you will find that when the critical point in the hunt arrives, your blood will course more rapidly through your veins, and before it is over, you will be excited as anyone. Wild cattle never water in the daytime, but choose the small hours of the night for that purpose. And as the best way to get within shot of them is to waylay a mob on their way to water, a cattle hunt is generally a night performance. The night must not be too dark, otherwise you will not be able to aim at a vital part. If you do not hit a beast in some vital part, behind the shoulder or right in the brain, your shot is thrown away. He will carry a dozen balls in his body and escape you after all. And on a very dark night, you may make some awkward mistake, hit a tame bullock instead of a wild one, and so forth. One night in a dry season, when mutton was poor and a little change in the shape of scrubber beef greatly wanted, a party of 4 or 5 was formed for the purpose of watching a certain waterhole, which wild cattle were in the habit of frequenting. Each man had his rifle, a supply of cartridges, and a butcher's knife. Our horses were tied up in a sheepyard near the waterhole, and we all went and crouched among some thick scrub close to the track where the cattle came down to the water. Our leader gave us directions on how to proceed. I know this mob well, and we are expecting it is the Mallee King's mob. There are 2 good bullocks with him, a poley and a strawberry. That's what I want tonight. Now, Charlie, you take one of the 2 and I'll take the other. The rest of you can hit anything you like. Mind you, don't fire till I give the signal, and keep as quiet as mice, for these beggars have the deuce's own ears. And if they hear the least noise, they'll be off like whitrets, and you will never see hair or their tails again tonight. So we lay down and kept quiet, talking together in whispers, and waiting anxiously for some sign of the cattle. It was a moonlight night, but clouds came over the moon occasionally, rendering the night darker at such times than was quite agreeable. Long hours did we wait, and the cattle came not. No sound broke the silence, save the melancholy cry of the curlew. We were all getting impatient, but one of our party, a visitor from Melbourne, was specially fidgety. He had never shot a scrubber and thirsted for the opportunity, fleshing his maiden sword. What's this Mallee King like? I should like to bring down that fellow. Oh, he's a great big black bull, as big as an elephant and as fierce as a tiger. If you want to hit him, mind you kill him. If you don't, look out for a tree. All right, I'll try him. By and by, trampling of many hooves was heard, and we saw a long line of cattle advancing cautiously in Indian file along the track. Where are they? Whispered our new chum. I don't see them. Hold your jaw there, fiercely hisses the leader. Quiet all. Now, Charlie, look out. Just then a cloud came over the moon, and all was darkness visible. We could see the herd coming nearer, stopping now and then to recontour, and then slowly advancing a little. Every nerve was strung to the highest pitch. I heard our Melbourne friend whisper, I see him now, but took no notice of anything save the cattle approaching nearer and nearer till they were fairly within rifle range. Now is the signal. Crack go the rifles. 2 beasts are down, and the rest skedaddle. All rushed to see what sort of beast had been secured. All, that is, except our new chum, who ran quite in another direction, calling out, I've got him, I saw him drop. Presently we followed him, greatly wondering how any of the cattle could have separated in that way from the herd. It's a tame beast he hit, says one. Perhaps it's a bush, sneers another. The clouds were off the moon now, and we saw the supposed Mallee King was a valuable horse, which had chosen that unlucky moment for coming to water. Great was the consternation and dire of curses, not loud but deep, at our new chum's awkwardness. It was long before he heard the last of this bit of colonial experience. Cattle hunting, to be sure, cannot rival pig sticking or tiger hunting in the dangers attached to it. Still, it has its bits of excitement too. An infuriated wild bull, wounded but not disabled, is not a foe to be despised at close quarters. Here is a short account of a venture of that kind, told by the person who was chiefly concerned in the affair. One night the Cove and I went down to the dam to see if we could come across a beast. I had only my old smoothbore, but we wanted beef badly. The mutton was that bad them times, you could see through the carcass of a wether, just like glass you could. So I takes old Brown Bess and joins the Cove. He had his rifle, and you know he can shoot. Well, we get to the dam, and we sneak behind the lignum bushes till some of them comes. We waited that long I was dog-tired, and I think I must have snoozed a bit. By and by, the Covey whispers to me. Here they are, Bill, he says. Get ready your weapon. I rubs my eyes and looks up, and there they were right in front of me, standing on the bank of the dam, having a look round before plunging in. It was a bright moon. You could see as plain as daylight. There was a big black bull and a nice white heifer standing by him, and the whole lot more around, just waiting like the black bull to sing out. All aboard for a drink. Mark the cow, Bill, says the bloke. I'll tackle the bull, says he. That's the Mallee King, and I mean to have him. So we fired together, the bloke and me. I didn't just kill the cow, but broke her shoulder, and down she comes. At first, I didn't think the Cove had missed, for the bull ran off quite lively for maybe 20 yards, and then all of a sudden he dropped in a heap and stretched out his limbs, dead as mutton. I made sure he was. We walked up to the cow, and we soon put her out of her troubles. I had just cut her throat, and had my butcher's knife in my hand, going to do the same for the bull. The Cove and I, we stroll up to him. Where did you hit him, sir? I says. Just between the eyes, says he. The word was barely out of his mouth when up jumps my gentleman as lively as you please, gives one big blast of a bellow, and then rushes at me at full tilt. I thought to myself, old Bill, it's all up with you, old man. I had a knife, of course, but what use was that? I might as well have had a bodkin. Luckily for me, the bank was steep and the bull was rushing down towards me. If the ground had been level, he would have had me for sure enough. It was a close shave as it was. His horn caught my old coat and carried off the pocket of it clean. I made off for a forked box there was, about 50 yards away, and I had not gone far when my lord had slewed around and after me. I hadn't much chance in a flat race with that fellow, you may be sure, but I had a bit of a start, and I ran my best, you bet. So I got behind the fork, with the brute about a yard behind me. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The Cove, you see, he'd run for his rifle, and slipped the cartridge in like winking, and when the bull's horns were getting rather too close to Bill's coat-tail, a ball takes him by the back of the neck and cooks his goose for him. He was dead enough now, and no gammon. The first ball was in his head, sure enough, just between the eyes, but why it didn't kill him beats me. You can ask the Cove, he'll tell you. But anyhow, it was the last of the Mallee King and the last of old Bill too, pretty nigh. It is not so dangerous to be chased by a bull if you are on a horseback. But even then, if your horse is a slow one, a mad bull in your rear is not pleasant. For a heavy animal, he can run very fast. A good stock horse, of course, can get out of his way easy enough, and if the bull makes a sudden rush, the horse is prepared for him. But with a slow horse, not used to cattle, your safety can hardly be called perfect. On one occasion, there was a great muster of all the tame cattle for branding, and there was a large gathering of horsemen on all sorts of horsemen. Towards the evening, the cattle had been all brought together into a paddock ready for the stockyard. In one of the mobs collected, there was a wild bull who had come very quietly into the paddock with the other cattle. There had been no trouble with him till he saw the stockyard before him. No sooner had he done so, however, than the old mad berserker spirit repossessed him. Perhaps a recollection of former torments in the same stockyard crossed his bovine mind. At any rate, out he burst from the herd with the sudden fury of an avalanche. All the Toms, Charlies, and Jacks followed in close pursuit, flaying his sides with resounding blows of heavy stock whips, which cracked around him like the noise of a platoon firing. After about a couple of 100 yards of this fun, he suddenly turned around upon Tom D, one of his pursuers, who unfortunately but indifferently mounted. Tom retreated at once furiously by the bull. The unlucky stocksman swore all the oaths current in the colony, and many brand new ones unheard of before that eventful evening, at the old mare, at the bull, and at things in general. He flogged, spurred, and tugged at old Nellie to get her out of the way of the bull's horns. But neither stockwhip, spur, nor bull's horn could get Nellie out of the regulation canter to which she had been so long accustomed. Tom called on somebody to shoot the wrench, but there was no rifle handy. So round the paddock they went, accompanied by half a dozen riders, whose whips sometimes fell on Tom, sometimes on Nellie, and sometimes on the bull, but the bull could not be got off. He still kept steady to his mark, his horns a couple of yards from Nellie's tail, holding his own, but unable to get any nearer. The stockman roared with laughter, but a stumble might have made it serious for Tom. At last, after 2 or 3 turns around, Tom got into one of the stockyards, and someone who happened to be by dexterously shut the gate between him and his pursuer. Disappointed in the corner, and the bull gave an angry toss of his shaggy head, wheeled round, broke through the circle of stockmen, cleared the paddock fence by a splendid leap, and, with a loud triumphant bellow, made off for the Mallee. The wild horses which are found in the scrub have probably strayed thither in the same way and about the same time as the cattle. They are not very numerous, at least in comparison with the wild cattle, and their depredations on grass and water are not very formidable, but they are very annoying to squatters, whose horse paddocks are not perfectly secure. Station horses are very apt to get among them, and in a short time become as wild and unmanageable as the worst of them. The horse hunting, therefore, is chiefly for the purpose of recovering the latter, and not so much for the sake of the wild horses themselves. As a rule, they have few good animals among them. They breed in and out too much, and there are more weeds than useful horses in a wild mob. Still, a good hardy horse is sometimes picked out from them, and many stockmen, fond of excitement, especially where wild horses are concerned, resort to various plans for capturing them. The wild horses, like the cattle, go in Indian file through the Mallee from one plain to another, and form a sort of narrow lane, well beaten and easily recognised. One plan of catching them is to fix in this lane a sort of wire snare, something like the snare used by the lads in the old country for snaring hares, but of course on a much larger scale. The horses trotting along the lane are caught in the snare, which is strongly fastened to a tree. But this plan seldom meets with much success. The trapper, when he looks into his trap, will either find his snare carried away, or if there isn't anything in it, the animal is found to be stone dead. Another plan, more successful but more laborious, is to fence in a waterhole where they are known to resort with a strong fence, 8 or 9 feet high, leaving an open gateway through which the horses can enter the stockade. The next thing is to be concealed as near as possible to the gate, and when the horses are well in, fasten it behind them. But this is not such an easy process as one might imagine. Their sense of hearing or smell is so accurate that they seldom find or discover the presence of the hidden watcher. Then they may bid them goodbye for the present, for they will suffer the last extremity of thirst rather than come near a suspected waterhole. And if he gets them into his yard, he must be smart about closing his gate, else the whole mob will be rushing over him and making pumpkin squash of him. When fairly caught, they are so thoroughly wild and untamable that quite as many dash their brains out against the posts or break their necks in desperate attempts at leaping over the rails, or get choked by the neck ropes, as are brought away safe and sound. Hence, leaving the fun of the thing out of the question, the game is scarcely worth the candle. But when good station horses get among them, it is a different matter. They must be got out somehow if possible, for the stock rider honour is at stake. Everyone who joins in a horse hunting expedition may expect plenty of mad galloping over crab-holey plains, among branching timber and tangled mallee, and ought to be prepared for at least one night's camping out with the usual luxury of without supper or bed. The reader will perhaps be satisfied with a single specimen of a horse chase, which he may be apt to regard as something of a wild goose chase. The end. I like that story. That was pretty cool. That was some pretty interesting stories about where the guy shot the horse by mistake. I thought it was funny, and I bet he had some choice words. And then when the guy shot the Mallee bull, and it was hit between the eyes, and it got up and kept chasing. I love all these old Australian stories about how life was in the olden days. Okay, that's it from me. I'll get back to you all next time. Bye.